What's going on, guys? And today I just wanted to talk about how I made this cool little Spaceman movie. If you haven't seen it yet, check out the link in the description. I wanted to talk a bit about how I went about creating this project. So, as with most projects, the first thing you usually have to have is an idea. And I knew that I wanted to do something that was in outer space. I just love sci-fi. So I had a look online at different examples of things I could do in outer space. And one of the things I looked at was doing a space battle scene. And so I had programmed a space battle simulator some time ago in Unreal Engine, and I thought, well, maybe I could use that for this project. But after experimenting with it a bit and downloading some models and just trying out what it looked like, I kind of realized that, yeah, it was cool, but it didn't really have that visual appeal that I think that people really resonate with. So I decided to sort of put that to one side and move on to find something a bit more compelling. And so I went to work finding assets that would fit into this scene. And the first one I found was of this cute little astronaut, which I thought was really cool. I thought that the price was pretty fair, so I purchased him. And then secondly, I had a look at a spaceship and I tried a few out. I found that this one, though, looked the cutest and kind of really matched the feel of the other asset. So I thought, yeah, let's use that. That's pretty cool. So then moving forward, I needed a planet that this guy could land on. And I thought, well, Mars is pretty cool. I really liked the movie The Martian. I thought that was an awesome film. And so I found this great tutorial online by Unreal Sensei. It's an incredible tutorial that shows you how to create a huge scale planet and then use Unreal Engine's atmospheric volumes to create a real sense that it has an atmosphere and that this is a real planet that you could potentially land on. And not only that, the tutorial goes into how you can actually travel between outer space and the surface of the planet, which is really an incredible feature of this video. I'd seriously check it out if you get the chance. So in order to animate this sequence, I needed some kind of storyboard to follow. And so I had a look online and thought, well, I'm not much of an artist. I'm not going to draw the storyboards up myself. What I might do is just find some images online and see if I can assemble a storyboard out of images from other movies. And so I did that using the website ShotDeck in combination with Google Images, and was able to put together this pretty cool sequence of shots. And I separated the sequence into two segments. There's the first segment where the spaceman is flying his spaceship through the atmosphere and his engines begin to burn up. And there's the second segment, which is where the astronaut actually ejects from the spaceship and the spaceship crashes, and then the astronaut's able to fly to safety using his rocket pack. And so with the storyboard done and my ideas in place, I had collected all the assets I needed from fab.com. I was ready to put together the scene. So first I had to get these elements in the scene. And one of the challenges I had was just rigging up the materials so that the spaceship itself would be illuminated with emissive materials and actually look really cool like it does in the previews on the Fab website. And then once it was done, I was able to bring that into an Unreal Engine blueprint and then have our little spaceman sitting inside the spaceship. I also added these point lights inside the cockpit just to make the spaceship look a little bit more believable. So with the asset materials all assigned, I decided to bring these assets into the level and see if I could animate them. And this proved to be a bit of a challenge. As I started, I thought, well, the easiest way would be just to create a level sequence, which is the main way that you animate movies in Unreal Engine. And then I would just apply a transform to the spaceship so that we could get the location of the spaceship to move over a period of time. And that seemed like a fairly straightforward strategy, but what I quickly realized is it's a fairly inflexible strategy. And so that led me to using something called splines. And splines are this really great tool in Unreal Engine, and it allows us basically to create a path of our choosing and then be able to manipulate that path afterwards, which is really handy when you're trying to create extensive paths that go on and on and on. And when you're in space, that's going to be the case. So I got to work animating the spaceship along the spline, and I had this really cool shot in mind where the spaceship would fly past the camera. It'd whiz past, and then the camera would pan towards the planet. And I think this came out really cool. I was so happy with this when I first saw it. I thought, wow, I'd never thought I'd be able to make something this awesome in Unreal Engine. But it turns out that with the right tips and tricks, you can actually do this fairly easily. With some perseverance, I managed to get to a point where I created a second spline on the planet that basically would serve as my second shot. And this would be of the spaceship sort of burning up as it comes through the atmosphere. And so I needed some kind of special effect to signify that the spaceship was burning up. And so I went to Niagara and I started having a look at different special effects online and found that I really needed to create something unique. And so I went to work building a particle effect that sort of showed space debris flying past the spaceship. And the main way I achieved this is by using an emissive parameter on the Niagara system and also using a wind force so that the particles would fly past the spaceship. And I thought this looked pretty cool, but there was a problem, and that was that the particle effects just randomly would turn off for a split second and then turn back on again. And I went to get some help from a lecturer of mine, and he was able to give me a bit of direction as to why this might be happening. But in the end, it seemed that the reason it was happening might just be my video card. I'm not exactly sure, but I had to leave these imperfections in there just so that I could progress and complete the project. And then I thought, well, after I've completed it, I'll have to go back and fix these issues in post. So moving on, I thought I'll create a fire effect for when the engines begin to fail. And this looked really cool. I was super happy with how this came out. I basically used another Niagara system to create these fire particles, and I used a material that basically looked like clouds to give it a more convincing appearance. It was a fairly simple Niagara system to create, and I was happy with the results. But there was one tiny issue, this little tiny hole here. I hate you, tiny hole. You are the bane of my existence. But I'd come back to that later. So with all this done, I decided to take a little break and put my work out there just for people to see and get a bit of feedback. And the feedback was pretty good. People really liked it. They wanted to see what happened next to the little space guy. So with my break over, I decided to go back to work. And so let's talk about the astronaut for a second, because I haven't really talked much about him. One of the big issues I had with him was getting him to express himself in an animated way while also using the included animations that come with the asset. The included animations are actually pretty good. I would highly suggest this asset if you want to make a game with him or something like that. Definitely check him out. He has some great little idle poses and falling poses and things that you can use. But then on top of that, I needed a way of controlling him so that I could get him to raise his arms or nod his head, all that kind of stuff. So what I did was I created a custom control rig in Unreal Engine that allowed me to maneuver his arms and legs across specific joints that I needed in order to do this project. So with those done, I was able to get him to eject out of the spaceship and lift his arms up as if he's falling out of the spaceship downwards towards the planet. And this looked really cool. I was super happy with how this turned out. And basically, it was a lot more of that throughout the project, just animating his movements to wave and to move his arms when I needed to. And that worked out really well. And so I think all in all, I've pretty much covered most of the technical elements, except for one thing. So I decided to open Nuke for the first time throughout this project and get to work editing. And I'm not really a Nuke guy. I did spend some time studying Nuke, and I did pick up enough that I can kind of do the basics, but I wouldn't consider myself an expert with it. And so I used two nodes, basically, the transform mask node and the rotopaint node. And I was able to do some pretty cool stuff with this. The first thing I fixed was that hole. And the second thing I fixed was this smoke issue, where one of my frames didn't have the right length of smoke. This is part of that particle effect issue where the particles were turning off randomly I mentioned earlier. Well, what I did was I basically drew the smoke back in again using the roto paint and cloning tools in Nuke. And that turned out relatively okay. I probably could have spent a little bit more time doing this, but I think at this point it looks good enough that I can show it off and enjoy it. So I found some really cool music, I found some really cool sounds, and I thought, yeah, this is pretty cool. If you'd like to know more about how to make projects in Unreal Engine, let me know in the comments and I'll see if I can create more content like this for you guys. In the midst at the moment, I'm also working on that zombie shooter game that you guys really liked, so keep an eye out because I'll be dropping some pretty cool stuff very soon. So hope you enjoyed, guys. Thanks for watching.